Film is our literature, so we should tell stories that are apropos of our culture, in that we can learn something about ourselves. David Stratham.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hole.
And I'm Lee Esses. Welcome to year 6 of the podcast. Things might sound a little different today because we have ended up on separate sides of the country. So we are starting this year as physically separate until I can convince Lee to move with me to Tennessee.
Yeah, probably not going to happen, but the wonders of technology, we're able to still continue this podcast despite the state's worth of distance.
This month, we are talking about how to break down a story. We have done this as bonus episodes once or twice throughout our 500 plus episodes we have now, but we thought it would be an interesting thing to do some case studies. So today's episode, we're talking about how we're breaking things down, and then at the end of all of our episodes this month, we're going to give you homework. That includes watching whatever movie that we're talking about next episode.
Overall, we're going to be talking about 5 main things. The first 3 of which are very key to the entire story. Without these 3 things, there is no story. And the first part of that is the characters. We are going to talk about who those main characters and the secondary characters are so we can help you break out and separate the definitions of those. I see that a lot with new writers. They have a hard time really pinning down who their actual main characters are because they think their entire cast is the main character, but that's not it. We'll talk about who had plot arcs, who had their own little character arcs within the story, and who didn't.
Included in the characters would be how they designed the characters, things like dialogue and word choice and names, these kinds of things that really tell us about the character, the choices that the storyteller made that informs the character.
And along those same kind of lines, we'll be pointing out the acting, directing, and different character choices that also really help define the character that you can then use and pull into your own writing because you, as the author, are kind of the director and actor all together in one.
The next thing we're going to talk about and analyze will be the plot and structure of the story that we're being told, what kind of plot structure they're using. A lot of them will be a 3-act type structure overlapping something else. This is good to identify if you are using this particular type, or if you want to write a story like Kiki's Delivery Service, here's a structure that might make sense for your story to then steal and then make your own.
And then we'll look into how long it took to get to the inciting incident, how long it took to get to the climax, and then how long after the climax before it actually ended.
These are pretty key indicators of the type of story structure that they will lean on. Some will spend a lot of time before we get to that inciting incident. Some will have a lot of little inciting incidents. And then some will just hit it right away and get going.
And then we get to talk about one of my favorite things, the world building in each different story and how it's presented, how it's introduced to really get the viewer into the story. So we'll look at how or if it is at all changed from our world, how that information is presented, and when they release it so that it fits within the story without being an info dump.
We will also, I don't think we can help but give our own opinions about if the story worked or not. The overall storytelling technique, the things that we really liked about it, the things that we would advise you modify before stealing for yourself, and the types of stories that all of the stuff in this particular movie that we're talking about can be applied to.
And I think something that we are going to have to try to keep in mind as well is some of the movies that we have chosen come from a different storytelling, different movie making era. So we have to keep in mind the differences in culture at the time or the place where these movies and stories were created that change somewhat the technique and the overall flow of the story.
We did try to keep to mostly movies that people have seen, are familiar with, so that if you don't happen to get around to the homework, then you can still at least understand. So our oldest of the collection is Jaws, which is 75. And then I believe Welcome to Marwen is in the last couple of years. That's our time slot. We're not going super classic Hollywood this time around.
So, as Lee mentioned, at the end of each episode, we will be giving you homework before the next episode. We will talk about what the next episode will cover, the movie that you should watch in that time. And then while you watch, try to look at it from this kind of lens. See if you can identify the characters, if you can identify the plot and the different structure that they're using, if you can identify the world building and all of that. See if then it matches what we have come up with in our own analysis of the movie.
And then, of course, chime in on Discord. We are still very active on our Discord channel, and we're checking it as often as possible. If you have your opinions, you're like, you know what? I think this is a 7-point story structure. No, I think it's a 2-act story structure. Sure, let us know. Let's debate it. Let's have a good time, because these types of conversations help develop those skills.
The whole purpose behind what we're doing is to help you learn. So some stuff to consider while we're going through this month is to steal the good stuff. If you find a character that, if they use a nice dramatic flair of a cape before they exit and you want to use it, do it.
And that is really a lot of the purpose, is the ability to identify. We're flexing those muscles of identifying good, bad, and ugly storytelling without bias. Because the first time you consume any story, assuming it's any good, you should be able to just enjoy it, to immerse yourself in the world, to get excited about whatever is happening to your characters, and to fall in love with them. The second time is to analyze why you liked it. And this month, the recipes that we're giving you are tools in order to analyze these things.
Some things that we will not be covering during this series will include elements specific to the filmmaking process, such as the costumes, the lighting design, the music. Yes, this is all very key in how the filmmakers tell the stories, but since we are a writing, novel-based education podcast, we want to focus on the story elements that you can actually use in a book.
So things that are character choices, like that cape flare, sure, these things will still come up because it's part of the story, but I'm not going to go, you know what, Dracula was a great movie because of the historical accuracy of the costuming. Cool, not relevant to what we're talking about. The next thing that we are not going to cover during this series would be books or TV shows. This is simply because of that homework element that we're implementing this time. It can take people a couple weeks to a month to read a book or binge watch a TV show. We release these episodes twice a week. That's a lot to try to maintain for a month just in consuming media.
We also have tried to avoid any really old or obscure movies. We really tried to hit the ones that you've likely seen or at least have some kind of easy access to that you may have heard of at the very least. And along that same, we are trying to avoid movies that are rated R. Nothing against rated R. There are a lot of good art films with fantastic storytelling that are rated R, but we also know that a lot of you may have families with younger children listening. We also have teenagers listening to this, so we are trying to balance it and keep this list mostly family friendly. A couple of the ones we do have are rated PG-13, so if that's something you're sensitive about, do what you need to do.
I noticed as I was talking on Discord and with some of my writer friends, a lot of the suggestions they gave me were rated R. About 2/3 of the ones I came up with on my own going, oh, this will be a great one to study, also rated R. So if you are up for watching rated R movies and you are interested in discussing the structure of some of these other ones, you can do these on your own. These would be movies like Atonement.
One of my personal favorites would be John Wick.
Under the Skin is one that was recommended to me. I don't know anything about it.
Another recommendation we got was The Pianist.
Pulp Fiction.
When Harry Met Sally.
Memento.
and another personal favorite, Serenity. This is on the list not because of the rating, but because there's an entire TV show that precedes it. We just don't have the time to cover that.
These stories that we're talking about just now or throughout this month are not exclusive. This way of studying and analyzing a story can be applied to pretty much any story that you come across. If it's a commercial about deodorant, there are characters, there is a world, a set at least, and there is a problem and solution, the solution being the deodorant that is part of the commercial. These stories will affect our lives in every way possible, so it's a lot of fun to analyze these stories and apply this type of analysis so you have a better understanding of what story is.
We're really excited to go through this series with you, to work together in this analysis storytelling process, and hopefully you enjoy the movies that we have picked for you. So your first homework for this series is to go watch probably one of the best Pixar movies that has ever been made and has one of the best structures that we could even analyze. And that is Up.
Up is a fantastic representation of just a good story. It doesn't end the way you think it will, but it ends in a way that feels great and satisfying and right. So check out that movie and think about these elements that we've talked about today, and we will hear from you on Monday. But until then,
Write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.